Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Book Drops. I am Don Boozer, the manager of the Literature Department and the coordinator for the Ohio Center for the Book here at Cleveland Public Library. And you are?
I'm Sarah Flynn. I'm the manager of the Popular Library.
And we are here today to talk about nonfiction.
Yes.
So we were trying to figure out some topics to cover, and we decided to go completely. We usually talk about fiction and genres and this kind of thing. Now we're looking at nonfiction, and nonfiction is one of those categories that catches everything.
Yeah.
So this will be a nice potpourri for everybody watching today, I think.
And we don't know what the other picks
And we
either,
do not
which
know what
is
each other picked.
unusual. Normally
So,
we kind of coordinate.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to it. And like I said, one of the things to keep in mind is that nonfiction does cover just a wide variety, everything from memoir and biography to science and travel and all that kind of stuff. So probably in the future we may narrow down our nonfiction topics. But I think this is a nice sort of introduction for this sort of. Is it a genre? Is nonfiction a genre?
I don't think so.
No, I don't either.
But what is it?
But what is it?
It's its own.
Put your comments online. So I'm going to let you go ahead and start.
Oh, good. And I was going to say the good thing about this too is I don't read a lot of nonfiction, so this kind of made me read some, and I really enjoyed it. And I have like a list of 20 books now that I want to read, so we have to do this again. So we need more recommendations too.
Glad to hear it.
So the first one I did on audio, it's called Burnout: The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle by Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And this is written for women, but I think everyone can take tips from this. And it's very interesting about how, from like an evolutionary standpoint, your body gets stressed in the modern day, and there's not a great way to come off of that. So if you're stressed at work every day, you're putting the strain on your body, and you have to release that somehow. And they compared it to, maybe back when we were hunting, you'd be in danger, and kill the animal. The danger would pass. You would kind of come down off it in like more of like a biological way, and we're not doing that now. So they give some, this is really early on, but I thought it was so interesting. They give some different examples of ways you can kind of cut that cycle. So exercise, breathing activities, laughing with friends, things you can do to kind of cut that out. So yeah.
And that sounds like advice everybody can use right now.
It is. So really good. And then a lot about, like you need to rest, and like 42% of your day should be rest. So that's including your sleeping time. So even if you're sleeping, 6-7 hours, you need to have 10 hours a day where you are not actively running around.
Does it mean an actual nap, or just that you're just sort of relaxed and
you're either exercising, being with friends or family, eating meals, not working or stressed.
A reduced stress sort of environment. Okay,
yeah.
Good.
And then
I can get on board with that.
yeah. So it's really interesting. It really points out that our society kind of expects you to just run and hustle and do everything and have the perfect house and the all of that, and that it's just not feasible, and it's okay if you don't. So I like to hear that.
Yeah, there you go. And I think it's interesting too that, from the way you're describing it too, it's very much an American cultural sort of thing to always be on the go and always have a side hustle and a main hustle and then a tertiary hustle and all that sort of thing. And whereas you look at some other like European
They
styles, it's like
take
you got
naps in the afternoon, right? It's like, and that's not American.
So then we'll campaign for that.
Let's edge a little that way. Yeah, definitely. So this kind of like puts the science behind like why you shouldn't hustle all the time, which is nice.
And I'm also curious, you said you listened to this on audio?
Yeah.
How was it on audio? I've sometimes found nonfiction, you can either go really good or it's like
The best thing, the author read it.
Oh, excellent.
So it was funny and lighthearted and jokey and great on audio.
That I think is one of the, especially with a nonfiction book, to have the so for fiction, you've mentioned that having the cast recordings of fiction books is such an amazing sort of experience. With this, it really seems like having the author give their own ideas and read their own book. They're going to be the one that's most intimately involved with the topic and that sort of thing. So that makes a lot of sense.
It wasn't like just a disembodied voice. So
Exactly.
I recommend this
Very
to
cool.
everyone.
Excellent. All right, so I will share my first one. I think I may have mentioned this before, but I recently just finished this one. This is Pandora's Jar by Natalie Haynes. Natalie Haynes is, of course, the author of 1,000 Ships that I rhapsodize about like repeatedly. This is a nonfiction book of hers, and it looks at women in Greek myth and sort of pulls out the different strands of the stories and all that sort of thing. And one of her big things is that Pandora did not have a box, she had a jar, and she doesn't even have a jar in all of the myths that are out there. So sometimes it's her husband who opens the jar and lets all the evil things out. Sometimes she doesn't have a jar at all. Sometimes it's really interesting to see all those disparate threads and what culture seems to have latched onto. She brings up the point that Pandora's story has gotten intertwined with Eve and the apple and that sort of thing. Gotcha. So it's like, oh, we get to blame a woman for this. So this is,
Hey.
so, hey, there you go. She does a really good job. Same sort of engaging style that she has on her podcasts, and which she just recently released a new series of her Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics, and the current episode is on Pompeii, which is awesome. So I can't recommend her highly enough. I think that she is coming out with a new fiction book soon that is a fictionalized account of Medusa, which should be very interesting.
Yeah.
So she's talked to them on some of the interviews that she's been on about that. But this is a really good eye-opening look at women in Greek myth and how we have sort of just glommed onto one interpretation, and there's so many other ones out there. One of the interesting ones too that I believe that she talks about in so Helen. She talks about Helen of Troy or Helen of Sparta. And one of the interesting things I found out about this one, and then I found out some other stuff too, is that one of the traditions of Helen is that she was actually spirited away to Egypt, spent the entire Trojan War in Egypt, and the thing that got taken from Sparta to Troy and caused the Trojan War was actually a ghost or an image created by one of the gods to get back at the Trojans and get back at Aphrodite and all that sort of thing. So Helen stayed blameless through this entire thing, but she gets blamed for everything because of this image that the gods created. And so, that kind of, so I had never heard that before.
No,
so I thought
me either.
that was fascinating. So
Very cool.
Pandora's Jar, Natalie Haynes, can't recommend it highly enough.
Nice. I couldn't get my hands on this book, and I did this on audio too, which was read by the author, which is Hello, Molly, and it's Molly Shannon from SNL, who does the Mary Catherine Gallagher, if you remember back. It was so interesting. I talked about this book for a week after I listened to it. She is engaging and hilarious. She's from Shaker Heights.
Oh, that's right.
And every chapter of this book, she had a horrible tragedy happen when she was young. And just the family kind of coming out of that. And her dad was just a super character and real wacky and kind of would dare them to do stuff. They'd go to an amusement park and he'd be like, hey, I don't want to pay for you kids, go around the edge there. And they'd be like, oh, we got scraped by the barbed wire, but no big deal. And then one time he dared her and her friend oh, you should just get on a plane, go somewhere, have fun, you're 11. And they did.
Oh,
they went
my.
to New York City and spent the day in New York City, and then called hey Dad, what are we supposed to do? You can't believe it till you listen to it.
Wow.
It's just so interesting. And then all the way through SNL years to now, she's acting in serious roles or kind of semi-comedic roles too. So I was just found out, learned so much about her, and went back and watched some Mary Catherine Gallagher ones, because the funny thing is she had her own show, or her own stage show, where she did bits and then got on SNL and was trying to sell them on some of these things. They're like, we don't really get it. This isn't for us. And then they made it happen, and of course it was a huge hit. So.
And Mary Catherine Gallagher is one of the ones from her stage show?
Yep. So
that's
it's
awesome.
yeah.
That's another one too, if you can get especially for the biographies. It's almost necessary to have the person read the book. So, yeah. And especially with her, I'm sure that it's a very distinctive speaking style and stuff like that.
Distinctive voice, and really emotes, and it was great.
Speaking of distinctive voices, I will put in a plug for Sarah Vale. I just grabbed this one basically at random. This one happens to be Lafayette in the somewhat United States. If you don't know who Sarah Vale is, she's also been on, I believe, This American Life and some NPR shows as well. She's also the voice of Violet on The Incredibles.
Yes. Yep.
So, but she has a very distinctive voice, and some people like it. I absolutely adore it. I think it gives such a character to her recitations and everything. She's written on a number of different topics, and what I like about her history books are that she sort of puts herself into the stories, and it's about traveling around, but she also brings in all the facts and all the meat that you need, but does it in such an entertaining way. This one happens to be, of course, about the American Revolution and Lafayette. She's written one on Hawaii. She's written one on the Pilgrims, which is the Wordy Shipmates, I believe, is the title of that one. The one on Hawaii was really an eye-opener, too, about the way that the Americans basically just took over the islands and did away with the monarchy and all that sort of thing. So, but she does a really good job. She's also part Native American, and she talks sometimes about her ancestors were on the Trail of Tears and that sort of thing. So she brings that sort of, perspective to things as well. She has a twin sister that will travel with her sometimes, but she's really does a good job of providing a good perspective on history in a very entertaining way. So if you like history, or even if you don't like history, you can give Sarah Vale a try. And again, I would recommend listening to her on audio. You can get an idea of her speaking style very quickly. If you don't like it, you have the print. But like I said, she definitely brings a nice, interesting perspective to the topic. So
Nice. I have one I'm in the middle of because my hold came in. And I was telling you before this, I was making little notes and putting little tabs in and things. Well, I'll tell Don about this later. And I put so many tabs in that it's not even worth it. It's so interesting. So this is called The Facemaker, A Visionary Surgeon's Battle to Mend the Disfigured Soldiers of World War I by Lindsay Fitzharris. And it is really interesting. So just that, plastic surgery was really not even a discipline. There was some jaw reconstruction and some things that were around, but because of how brutal World War I was and medicine hadn't caught up to how devastating the weapons that were used, this guy's name is Dr. Gillis. He had to come up with ways to put people's faces back together.
Oh, wow.
And just made it his, he worked on the battlefield for a while, I think earlier in 1915, and then went back to a field hospital in England and set up camp and tried to, convince the higher ups that this is really a huge thing and these guys are coming back and they need specialized care. And he was so devoted to this. He said, if they're treated wrong on the battlefield, they're not able to recover. But if you can get them to me quickly, I can heal them. It is just unbelievable.
Wow.
They didn't have helmets when they started World War I. They just wore little caps. And then that was one of the things I wrote. I was the Brody helmet in 1916, a few years into the war, they decided, it would probably be good if these guys had some sort of thing to protect their head and their face. And they figured out a helmet design and got them to the soldiers a few years into the war. So by that time, so many soldiers, and it was really difficult for him too. They had to patch these guys up and send them back in. If it was just your face, you can go back and fight. So he'd spend, months rehabilitating these guys and they'd go back to fight. So it's just fascinating. So
and what is the title again?
The Facemaker.
Wow.
So just the birth of plastic surgery because of necessity. And it's just really interesting.
That's wild. Those are the kind of things I think that always surprise me because, if somebody said, hey, would you read a book about, plastic surgery in World War I? I'm like,
I don't think so.
Maybe I'll put it on my list down here or there. But I mean, And if you get a good author who can write engagingly on a topic and really suck you into this, do they concentrate on sort of the story of the doctor and sort of make it a very
It's
personal
the story,
sort of narrative?
yeah, because just so really nice stories that are pulled out from different parts of his life. When he first started, he couldn't convince anyone. He went to a printer and printed these tags in like a bright paper and said, anyone on the front, he like got them to the front and he said, tag these on any of the guys that need facial reconstruction, and then they'll get to me faster. Like he just did his own, he didn't take no for an answer, and he just like blazed this trail, and it's so interesting.
Oh, that's wild. Well, you mentioned the tab, so I will actually show this one. I've mentioned this a couple times, so I'll do this a quick one. So this is, of course, Kent State by Dirk Bakdurf, and you'll notice all of the tabs in here. I had actually talked to Dirk for an interview kind of thing, and I was like marking stuff. So it's nothing but tabs in here. But I am still convinced that this is the definitive book to read if you want to understand what happened at Kent State and around that time and all the things that led up to it and the aftermath. It's so well researched. It's so well done. We actually chose it as our Great Reads from Great Places selection for the National Book Festival this year for the adult selection. So this will be highlighted at least at the National Book Festival. And so amazing book. If you don't think, I don't like comics, this is a solid nonfiction work that you need to read if you want to understand that time period. So.
So I'm going to talk about the end of everything, astrophysically speaking.
I'm curious to hear about this.
By Katie Mack.
Yes.
I started this on audio, but had too many things going and wasn't able to finish it on audio. But this stuff is really hard to understand. This is like, Stephen Hawking kind of stuff, but I'm like, I'm gonna do it. And, she really describes it really well. But so pretty much she lists the 5 ways that the universe would probably end.
Great.
And I'll read them to you because they're terrifying.
Because they're terrifying.
Wait, they're right here. The Big Crunch, Heat Death, Big Rip, and Vacuum Decay, or the Bounce. And then she describes all of them. So, pretty much, and excuse me for my scientific knowledge, but the universe is expanding.
Okay.
So I was going to highlight one, which is the Big Crunch. So can the universe keep expanding forever?
Okay.
Probably not. There is a way that the universe may start coming back the other way. So we would get the way they can look at distant stars and galaxies, they'll be able to tell if they're slowly coming back, and we'll get kind of like a warning, hopefully, that it's starting to come in, and there's no survivable way to get through,
right.
But we would have a lot of notice, hopefully. But yeah, instead of the Big Bang where it's expanding, it could start coming back on us, and it would be like a nuclear explosion, pretty much. So terrifying and interesting, and that's just one of the 5. So, but yeah, very, as down to earth as you can get with astrophysics.
That's the thing about science books too. I think that it's really hard to make them both accessible and sort of still stick to the facts too. So if you have a science communicator that can do that, at least on some level, then you really have something. Yeah. I heard her interviewed on Alan Alda's podcast, Clear and Vivid.
Ooh,
so
nice.
It's about communication and that sort of thing. And the interesting thing about the podcast is any of the ad revenues that come from it are donated to his Center for the Communication of Science at Stony Brook University.
Wow.
So Clear and Vivid, it's good. But yeah, he has scientists on often that will talk about their books. So
interesting.
So I got the Cliff Notes version from the podcast.
Hey, good. Yeah.
Speaking of the universe, look at us having our segues. The cartoon history of the universe is one of my favorite history books, we'll say, in the widest possible sense. This, of course, is the cartoon history of the universe. It literally starts at the Big Bang, and over, I believe it's 4 volumes of this size, he comes up to basically the present-ish day, and I think it ends like the 70s. There's another volume. There's 3 volumes of the cartoon history of the universe, and then there's a cartoon history of modern history, I believe is what it's called. but it goes through dinosaurs, it goes through, all the different cultures. What I really did like about it was it's not just a cartoon history of Western culture. He does China, he does India, he does, all the ancient civilizations, Indus River Valley, all those sorts of things, and literally covers the entire history of the universe from the Big Bang on up. And it is just absolutely, and so there's literally, there's the Big Bang right there. So yeah, so this is a nice, and one of the things that always impressed me about this, it's not just that he wrote the history, he actually has, these are all his bibliography in the back. So he has an illustrated bibliography in the back of the book that goes on for page after page after page. So it is quite the impressive work.
I have a few choices. I think I'm going to talk about these two. I got really into drinking tea. And I've been going, we have a really good store, the Tea Lab, that's just kind of a short walk from the library.
And we won't charge you for that plug.
Yeah, it's a free plug because they're amazing and so helpful and, talk to you about all sorts of things. So I started blending my own herbal teas and then really got into it. It's so interesting and it's really, really cool to learn all of the properties of the different herbs and what they're used for. And they've been used for thousands more than that years in different cultures for different things. And I have been just nerding out on this for real. So this is the book that really got me started, Healing Herbal Teas by Sarah Farr. So she kind of works through her approach to blending teas. She has recipes in here for different times of year and then also different if you're having trouble sleeping, headaches, things like that. And then kind of tying into that is Growing Your Own Tea Garden by Jody Helmer. And there are, lots of books about growing herbs. And so I've just, been reading a ton about it and planning out my herb garden. But for now, I just buy them and blend them. But I'd really like to get
a little apothecary going.
I know. It's super, super interesting.
Cool.
Yeah. So
very cool. Well, I will share one that has sort of a hobby of mine, at least in the past. I haven't done anything with it for a while, but these are two books on conlanging or creating artificial languages. This is The Art of Language Invention by David J. Peterson. This is In the Land of Invented Languages by Erica Ockrent. And these two books, this will show you how to do it. This will give you a history of constructed languages. And by constructed languages, I mean Tolkien's Elvish and Star Trek's Klingon and Esperanto and all those sorts of things. David J. Peterson was the person who did the Dothraki and High Valyrian languages in Game of Thrones. Eric Ockrent actually has written a number of articles in various magazines about that have to do with constructed languages and linguistics and language. So she's a really fun read for that sort of thing. I will say that I have a personal connection to both of these books. So David J. Peterson, I actually know, I guess would be. So I've gotten to eat In-N-Out burgers in his apartment out in California. And I met Erica Ockrent at the Language Creation Conference a number of years ago now, and I actually show up in here. So I'm actually in the index, so there's that. But she does a great job of going through the different strains of constructed languages. So she talks about Esperanto and Bliss symbolics, and even talks a little bit about Hebrew, the way Hebrew was reconstructed from its biblical roots into a modern language. And then she talks about artistic languages like Klingon and all those sorts of things. So, and like I said, David does a great job of taking you through step by step. If you want to create your own language, this is definitely the book to borrow out of the library or to get a copy of yourself. So,
oh man, this one is called An Immense World. It's by Ed Young, and it's how animal senses reveal the hidden realms around us.
Oh, wow.
So there's different chapters for different senses that animals have. So of course, sight, smell, all of that. And then I pulled one that I thought was more unusual. So magnetic fields and animals that are guided by magnetic fields, because I thought it was really cool.
Color me intrigued.
I know. They said, they couldn't figure out how there's these moths in Australia, and they, in the summer, they would go find a cave and go dormant, and they couldn't figure out how they migrated and how they knew where to go, and they thought maybe they're looking at the stars and going by the light and couldn't figure it out, and they finally figured out that it was the magnetic like poles of the earth, like they were following it almost like a compass, and that's how they were able to do it, which is just like crazy. So but yeah, so they highlight, I liked right at the beginning of the book, they talked about if you had a spider and an elephant and this all locked in a room, and then describing how each one is going to process the world differently. Like the spider is going to feel on the like strings of their web, like that a bug has got caught there, and how each animal processes things so much different than other animals. So
cool.
It's just really, really cool.
Wow. Again, one of those topics that's like, you don't even know exists.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my heavens!
So,
wow.
yeah.
I will say that. Let me see. For another sort of language one. This is from a number of years ago now. This was actually made into a movie, I believe, with Mel Gibson and Sean Penn.
It was good.
So The Professor and the Madman, A Tale of Murder, Insanity, and the Making of the Oxford English Dictionary. Sounds like a weird title, but it is an absolutely fascinating story of the Oxford English Dictionary was looking for citations for words to put into the dictionary. It's like, here's the first instance of this word and that sort of thing. And they were getting a lot from like this one doctor, professor sort of guy, and they have, the person at the dictionary wanted to meet him, so he goes to this prison, insane asylum sort of place, and is expecting to meet one of the staff members, and it ends up he is actually an inmate who's been sending in all of the citations for the dictionary. It's an absolutely fascinating read. Simon Winchester's written a number of books that look at really niche historical topics. But this is it's nice and short. It's a nice quick read, and I would highly recommend picking this one up if you want some sort of those weird little. This is almost true crime sort of ones that I had with Mike the other week. This is definitely one to pick up.
Very nice. I have one more. It's a teeny little one called "I'd Rather Be Reading: The Delights and Dilemmas of the Reading Life" by Anne Bogle. This is nice. It's just a little teeny book, and it just talks about like different things about reading, and the one thing I really did like about it, and like talking about either becoming a reader or the point where you became a reader, where she either watched her kids do it or talked to other people about like a book that you know, when you were 14 or 18, you were had to stay up late to read because you couldn't not find out what was going to happen. So I really like that, and like describing the joys of reading and like what a good book means to one person isn't necessarily what it means to another, and how do you recommend a good book to someone? It's very difficult.
Oh, so how do you recommend a good
book
to someone?
Right, it's very, very difficult.
Exactly, yeah. So. With books like that, I always think of Nancy Pearl. I saw her speak like one time, and people were just asking her for recommendations, and just off the top of her head, she's just throwing these things out, and I'm just like, I don't even know how you do that. It's really amazing. So a really good reader's advisor is just an amazing thing to watch. We can all do it. Librarians can all do it, but some of us have a store of knowledge in the back of our heads that's just like second to none.
Yeah, skill.
Well, that brings us, I believe, to the end of another Book Drops episode. Wow. That was a fun one. I will be adding some to my Goodreads list again. There's another plug. They don't need a plug, but so I will definitely be adding some of those to my want to read list. So we look forward to having you back in another 2 weeks and for a new topic, and we will see you then. Thanks for joining us.